Hi everyone, welcome to this crowdcast, to this webinar that is called Computer-Aided Translation in Smartcat. I'm Vova, head of community at Smartcat, and you can watch this webinar on Crowdcast. You can watch it on YouTube, and you can watch it on our Facebook page. The best way is to watch it in Crowdcast, because then you will be able to chat, to ask questions, and to answer to my polls. So if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook or our community website, you can see the link, probably watch on Crowdcast. So follow it. You will need to sign up with Crowdcast, but it will be the most fun. Anyway, today we will talk about using Smartcat not as a means to get orders, which we talked about the last week, but as a tool that you can use to translate faster, better, and in a more focused fashion. Just a second. Sorry, had my fridge running and it could be noisy. Anyway, last week we talked about getting orders on Smartcat. If you were there, you remember that I told you that one of the main factors that you search, that customers find you by, is how much you translate in Smartcat on your own projects. So even if you didn't plan to use Smartcat as a cat tool initially, and just wanted to use it to get orders, it makes sense to use it as a cat tool. Also in this webinar, we will discuss the very basics of computer-aided translation. So if you had no experience with cat tools at all, you will still hopefully find it useful. You will learn the fundamental principles, terms, and so on. Anyway, let's start. I want to make this webinar not in a presentation mode as I did the last one, but I would rather show you the system as it is in live action by translating a document that I prepared for this webinar. By the way, if you are already on Crowdcast, there are a few dozens of people here, so you can see the polls tab on the left. Please click it. There are some questions that will help me better adapt this webinar to the audience. First of all, I asked, what's your primary field of translation? Let me see. So we have a lot of business, general, legal, literary, software. Okay, I think the document I prepared will fit quite well for us. Also, people say that they know a little bit about cat tools and Smartcat, which is good because that's exactly the type of audience that this webinar is best intended for. And what's your cat tool of choice? Most of people obviously answer Smartcat, surprise, surprise, because perhaps they received our newsletter, but there are also a lot of people who use Troubleshoot. It's great because you will be able to see the difference and compare the pros and cons of all options. Anyway, let's start. I will show you the document that I will use today. Let me focus on the window with a screen share, just a second. So this document is in Spanish, but it's a little bit of a trick on my side. It was initially in English. I translated it to Spanish with a machine translation, so don't be surprised if it sounds like gibberish. The point is to have a document that I will be translating to English, because I wouldn't be able to translate it to Spanish. So it's a pretty usual document if you are translating a lot of general business technical software documents. It's some kind of instruction to use some kind of system. I replaced all names and trademarks here to make it anonymized. You can see that there are some lists, there are some hyperlinks, there are different kinds of fonts. Also, there are commands in Word. You know, when someone comments on something, there are some inline buttons and so on. So the first point that I wanted to explain is that using a cat tool helps you focus on your translation. Imagine that you are translating this document just in Microsoft Word, right? You would need to click through all these paragraphs. You will probably be replacing it sentence by sentence, and Word most probably will give you some tricks when you try to work with numbered lists and so on. So you will be switching a lot clicking a lot back and forth and so on, as you probably do a lot if you are not using a cat tool. So what a cat tool, Smartcat in our case, does is it turns the formatted document into a tabular view when you have the source on the left and the target on the right. Let me show you from the very beginning how it is done in Smartcat. So you click Create Project. You choose the file. One of the pros of using an online CAT tool such as Smartcat is that you can use it from any computer without having to install something and without having to copy and paste it when you move from one computer to another. Because, for instance, I prepared this webinar while working on my Windows PC, and I'm now giving this webinar while working on a Mac, and I didn't have to do any migration. Of course, you will not be giving webinars, but in any case, as a freelancer, you will likely have occasions when you are working from a cafe or from a vacation house or something. So when you create a document, you can choose some options. For instance, I will click not to upload document commands because we do not want to translate them. I will just click next, choose the source and target language, and I will right away click some buttons here that you will see the use of after later on. So I will click use machine translation. Computer-aided translation is not the same as machine translation, but it can use machine translation as a draft for your work, and you will see how it is done in Smartcat very soon. So in most cases, you can use machine translation for free in Smartcat because our partner, Microsoft, it provides the option of providing free machine translation to you. In case you agree to them receiving your translations, not for their own use, but for improving their machine translation engine. If you are working on some confidential documents, then you might want to use paid machine translation, which is anyway quite cheap, but in this case, no one will, your data won't go anywhere. Another thing I will turn on is glossaries. There are also translation memories, but they are created automatically for your project. So for now, I will create a glossary for this project just by clicking glossaries and create. Okay, we're good as it is. We created the document. Now let us see how it looks. We're clicking on the project, hovering over the document. You can open a separate window for a project, but you can also do this from this overall overview of all your projects. We click open and the editor opens. By the way, if you want to ask any questions, feel free to do so. On the left, where is the Q&A section. I think there is quite a bit of questions there. Vote for the ones you like most, so I will be answering to them later on, from the most voted to the least voted. So here you go. That's our document. If you remember, it looked like this. When you put it into a CAT tool, into Smartcat, it will look like this. So every row refers to a sentence in the original document, and columns refer to the source text and the target text. So what you do when you translate is just type in the translation on the right, and then click confirm. You can do this by clicking this button, but this would probably take a lot of your time. Instead, you can click Control Enter on a Windows PC, and on a Mac, either Control Enter or Command Enter. As you translate the text, you can see that there is a status bar in the upper part of the window, and it shows you how many words you have translated. This is one of the issues when you translate without a CAT tool, that you never know actually how far along the way you are, because you can of course select the text from the beginning and count words in the editor that you use, but it anyway will take some time and it's not very handy. In Smartcat, once you translate, let me enter this as well. By the way, if you see the box on the right, you can see that there is something with the MT there. That's the machine translation I was talking about. So you get this machine translation on the right that you can use as a draft for your own translation. This does not always work. The reason it works well in this document is that because first it was initially translated from English to Spanish. That's why, of course, its back translation from Spanish to English will be good, even a machine translation. It also works fine for legal documents, for technical documents, for some software manuals. It doesn't work well for marketing or literary translation because once you use machine translation, you limit your mind to the constraints that this translation gives you, and you might not find some better translations that you could have found if you were translating from scratch. So I suggest that you only use machine translation for more technical texts. So you can see that the status bar fills in, and it also shows it in percentage and in the number of words. As you go further, you translate the whole document, and then you are done. We will, of course, not translate the whole document right now, but we will show some things. So one of the things I said that you will be able to focus on your translation and track its progress. That's exactly what I have shown right now. So when you translate your document in such a tabular view, you are not distracted by formatting, you are not distracted by the need to switch between sentences. You just go on one by one, and it makes you translate faster in a more focused manner. Now we come to a segment where you have such strange shapes, hexagon shapes with numbers. These are called tags. Tags can be singular, like here, and they can also be double, like for instance in the next segment. Tags mean that in the original text there was some kind of formatting in this place. For double text, it's easy when you have a text that is enclosed into text. It means that, for instance, it was typed in bold. Let's see it in the original document. You see that here the word release date were bolded out. So it happens here by showing you the text. You see, there are not many changes we are adding here, so it really increases the speed of translation if you use machine translation wisely. So when you have such a tag, and you want, of course, in your target translation also to have the same formatting, then you just select this part, and you can either click Alt1. You do not see my keyboard, but hopefully you can understand what I mean, or you can click it on the toolbar. I will click Alt1. You can also press F8. In this case, the next tag will be inserted after this. This helps you avoid messing with formatting. When the tags are, let's confirm this segment. We will also use machine translation here. So in this case, we have singular text. This means that in this place there was either some symbol that cannot be shown, or some image, or in this case these were commands. In this case, you want also to have the same commands in your translation. Let me see if the translation is fine. Quickly correct it. And we will put the same tags in the same place. And in this case, I will just put them one after another by clicking F8. Sorry, it doesn't work like this here. Let me click F8 from the keyboard, one after another. I will insert 3 tags here and the others here. It might seem like a tedious job, but I actually find it very useful because I can focus on translation and not on anything else. Okay, let us confirm this segment. And by the time I want to show you how the document that you translated looks like, because after all, your customer in the end wants to see your to see a document, not some table. You have the options here by clicking download. It's also available from your workspace. You can download the original document, of course. You can download a bilingual document, which will have the same table in Microsoft Word format. It's not used every time, but sometimes you will need it. And of course, the button that we will need most is to download the translation. First, Smartcat prepares the translation. It does it quite fast in this case. You click download, and let me show how it looks like. I cannot share Microsoft Word with you here, so instead I will upload the same document to Google Drive. You see here it is automatically named with the suffix referring to your language. Let us take a quick look at it. You see some parts are already translated. Where we had different formatting, we have the same formatting in the target document. Once we translate the whole document, we will have the whole document in the same format that the original document was. If you had the hyperlink, you will have tags that let us find some, for instance, some email address. By the way, that's one of the features you can do to find segments that match some filter. You enter just it's in these top fields. I entered the @ to find some emails. Let us quickly translate it. Jason Hetfield, right? Not James Hetfield. So this hyperlink led to some mail to link to create an email message in the original document. Let us try to confirm it. Download it once again and make sure that it looks the same way in the translation. Okay, create existing. Let us find this guy. You can see that we had this sentence translated and we still have the hyperlink here. I guess that if I click it from the Word document, it will open a new ML message link for me. That was the first part of today's demonstration, to show you just the very basic thing that you can do with a document in Smartcat, which is translated from the beginning to the end using just the table that you have and focusing on your translation. Let us see if we have any questions that I can answer right now. Is there any way to remove the option of error recognition for a particular project instead of manually ignoring each supposed error? Let me come back to this question once we discuss quality assurance, and I will show you how we can do this. Let me see some other questions that I can answer. One about glossaries, we will touch on this. Way to ignore numbers in the whole document. Also, we will talk about Q&A. Carl Carter asks, what would you say are Smartcat's main strengths? Good question. Maybe you could also ask what are its main weaknesses. But anyway, our main strength is that we are really easy to use. The program is really easy to use. If you had experience with some desktop tools, you might have been wondering why it was so bulky. You had to click so many buttons to just start translating, and all the menu items were hidden somewhere. That was completely illogical. That was my experience with CAT tools. On Smartcat, it's really easy. You just upload the document and start translating. The second strength is that it is available online. As I said, you can use it from anywhere and you don't need any installation. The third strength is that it is free at all. So you don't have to pay anything to use it for however much you want. You can add any number of translation memories, any number of projects, and so on. And the fourth, the biggest strength, I think, is that you have synergy from using it for your own projects and for using it to get more customers. If you have seen our previous webinar, then you know that you can use Smartcat that there are customers on Smartcat who actually go around looking for translators. And the more you translate in the CAT tool, the higher your odds are to be hired by a customer. So you get a really complementary service here. You use it for your own projects, and at the same time, you become more visible to clients. I think these are the main strengths that I could mention. Maybe also some other guys can mention anything in the chat. How to make concordance work? I will talk about concordance when we talk about translation memories. Okay, Sergey asks, what about cases when in translation you have to use formatting that is different from the source? For example, bold font in English instead of quotation marks in Russian. There is no option to do this right now in Smartcat. You cannot change the formatting of the source document. The workaround I usually use, I do not use it to change quotation marks to bold, but for instance, you can use it if you need to make something in italics in English according to English rules, and you do not have italics in the source text. In this case, I use kind of Markdown syntaxes, something like this. Let's say I want to make the word ticket here italic. I enclose it into something, and then when I have downloaded it, I will make an auto replacement in MS Word to replace this with italic text. It can be done with Word wildcards. I will not show it right now, but it's not that hard. I know it's not the perfect workaround, but that's the way you can do it right now. If it's vice versa, if you have some formatting that you do not need in the target, then it's easy. You just add the tag at the end of the text, and in this case, it doesn't apply to anything. Next. Okay, I think these are the questions that related to what I have touched on so far. Let's go on. The second point I wanted to mention, if you read the description, that computer-aided translation helps you avoid translating repeated and similar phrases. Let's see how it works. One second. We will need to find some segment. I will remove it here. That is repeated several times. We'll just click the browse to this. And you see this mark here. It means that this segment is repeated somewhere in the same text. Whatever you translate in Smartcat is written to your project's translation memory. It means that the platform remembers how you translated this segment from the target language to from the source language to the target language. Let us see the translation here. It was actually a part of a bigger segment that was split into two, but that's another topic. So indicate the reason for refusal in the comments. I don't think the quotation marks are needed here, but anyway. We confirm this segment. And then if you take a look, let us make a search by these words. You can see that we had 3 segments with the same text. I will now remove the search and move to these other segments manually. Let's see, 107. You can see that your translation was automatically inserted here. The same happens to all the other segments that have repetitions. They are inserted automatically. Moreover, it doesn't only apply to this document. If you have a client, and I will show some hack right now, so you can have clients in Smartcat, kind of an attribute to your project. So you can, for instance, have a client that is called Acme. I don't know why it says it so weird, but let's it doesn't matter, it doesn't affect anything. Let's call it this way. So if when you create a project, you can choose which customer it relates to. You can also choose it later. Let's do it right now. We will open our project. We will open its settings, and we will set the client to Acme. Now, let's say you have another instruction to translate. I don't have another one, so I will use the same, but just imagine. So we have another instruction that just by coincidence has the same wording. It can happen quite often if you have, for instance, some company description, even in marketing documents, or you have some disclaimer or something. We indicated it's the client Acme. In this case, the system will automatically use, for some reason it doesn't. Okay, I need to select the project. The project name. Okay, let us see if it works like this. I'll click. Okay, it should have been used automatically, but let's do it like this right now. Next time you have a project for the same client, when you run across the same segment, again, it will be translated automatically once again. But that's not the most useful thing of translation memories. Let's see our segment 57. Right now, it doesn't have any translation here, but once you get to this segment, it will insert it. And you will see here it says 102% match. So it can be confusing what 102% means. 100% match means that you have the same text in the source segment. 101% means that you have the same text in this segment and either the previous or the next segment. And then if you have 102% match, it means that both this segment, the previous one, and the next one are the same. This means that it is more likely that the translation will be the same. Now that's what I wanted to show. We have now two documents with the same content, but I wanted to show some kind of partial match. I'm not sure I will be able to find it here right now, but I can guess I can do this manually. Let's do it like this. We will go to our text and we will create it a bit. We will modify it a bit. We will replace the name of the company here to something else. I don't know what to put here. Let's try Google. Online, can you write in the chat if you see me, because Google Docs doesn't seem to work. Okay, now it does. Hopefully you didn't miss anything. I will download it as a docs file once again, and I will create a new project with this slightly changed document. Client Acme, Spanish, English. I don't know why it doesn't take our translation memories. But anyway, we will choose it automatically. You have a translation memory for every project, so even if it doesn't do it automatically, you can choose the translation memory you want to use in this project. There are different ways to use it, to do it. Either you can have a translation memory for each project, or you can, for instance, create some general translation memory, and then each time you create a project, you can choose it and just work with this translation memory. In this case, you will have huge translation memory that you can reuse in any other projects, or maybe even in any other CAT tools, because you can download them in TMX format and use in the same trade-offs if you wish to. Vanessa, I will describe glossaries in the next step. So I will show everything that you are asking right now. Just hold on for a little while. So let us open our document. Okay, you see here the different text. So the first one was inserted automatically, and by the way, you can see that it's 101% match because there is no previous segment. Now comes the fun part. Here it was not inserted automatically, but if you look to the right, you can see that there is a 93% match that you can insert. Once you insert it, you can take it in the CAT panel pane. You can now look in the CAT info pane. It can be hidden if you don't have high screen resolution, but you can just move it like this. And you can see the difference between the segments. And you can know what you have to translate, to change in your translation. That's how it works. It's really useful because, especially in technical translation, you have a lot of phrases, sentences that are almost similar. On a side note, a lot of people think that translation memories, a lot of translators think that translation memories are meant to use translators and to exploit translators, because agencies sometimes they charge lower rates for partial matches, or so-called fuzzy, sorry, I don't know the pronunciation, matches. I always say that translation memories and fuzzy matches are a tool. I, for instance, have never worked, maybe a few times, but I generally do not work with agencies who charge lower rate for partial matches. On Smartcat, you do have such discounts. There is, if you work on customer orders, and you can see it once you accept the project. But in general, what I mean to say that even when you work on your own projects, you can use it to your own benefit. It doesn't mean that TM matches are meant to exploit you. It all depends on how you agree with your customer. You can agree with them that you will not give any discounts even for full matches, because, for instance, the translation memory can come from some other translator and it can be poor in quality, in which case you will have to edit it. And in this case, you can agree with the customer to charge full price for such matches. On Smartcat, currently there is no technical possibility to do this when you get a customer order, but if you agree on such a thing with the customer, you can always write to support, explain the situation, and then they will fix the count, the word count, the effective word count, and the price payable to you. One thing you should know when working on customer orders is that if you have a full match, then do not edit it unless you have agreed with the customer that you will charge for this, because otherwise you will be just doing this work for nothing, because you will not get paid if you correct a full match. Now that's it what I was going to say about translation memories, except for concordance. XDM asked how to make concordance work, and can I create similar project for any project sent to me? I don't understand the second part of the question, but I can show you how concordance search works. So concordance search is a a clever word for searching within your translation memories. For example, you translate a document and you run across a word that you do not know how to translate. For instance, let's say it will be portal. Of course, you usually know how to translate it, but let's say there are different options. You can say it by some other ways, and you want to know how it was done by the client before or how it was done by you before. So you just open this concordance search tab and click search. and you find all matches from the connected translation memories when you had this word. You can also make it work the other way around, so you can type, in this case, an English word and see whether you had translation memory matches with this word. That's how concordant search works. It is useful if you want to manage terminology. So you receive a new project from a client, they give you some translation memory to use, and you do not have a glossary in place. We will talk about glossaries just a few minutes later, but sometimes you don't have them, then you can use concordance search like this. And now we come to the most fun part, to glossaries, which is my personal favorite because you can use them in all kinds of translations. For instance, we see in the polls that we have 4 literary translators here. In glossaries is something that you can use even in literary translation. Glossaries are in the simplest explanation, there are pairs of terms. Let's say you say that socio in Spanish should translate as partner in English. Maybe it can be translated in some other ways, but for this exact client, you want it to be translated like this. If you remember when we created the document, we created a glossary for it. Now let's see how it works. It was in a different document, so let's come back here. Let us translate this word socio. So we select it in the source text and we click this button in the toolbar, or we click Control E or Command E on the Mac to add it to a glossary. You enter the source term and the target term. What's interesting, I will not change here socios to socio, because Smartcat is one of the few tools, at least those I know, that supports morphological search. So even if you add a word socios, it will be highlighted in the source text whenever you meet it. For instance, you see in this segment, you will have it highlighted. And to insert it, all you will have to do is to find the translation here and click on it. But that, of course, will not be very convenient or very quick. So you can just instead click Command or Control 2 in this case. You can see the numbers on the left. So you click Command or Control, followed by this number. The sequence of suggestions in this pane is as follows. First, translation memory matches, then terminology matches, then machine translation. As I said, let's find some segment where this word is in the singular form. Just 1 second. Okay, here. You see, it still has identified it. So you can type there, then click Command 2. Oh no, not Command 2, Command 1. It will return the word partner. And if you have a document like this where the same word is repeated many times, then it makes it much easier to type it in by using terminology. Not to mention that you actually know how to translate every word. In this case, it's a simple word, but it doesn't have to be like this. For instance, I was translating a book on numismatics some time ago, and there were so many terms that I couldn't just grasp with my head. I think there were hundreds of them as the very least. And having this in Smartcat saved me a lot of hours, because otherwise I would have to have some spreadsheet or something to follow them. It can work also the other way around. You can select the word in the translation, click the same shortcut, and enter then the source term. It will also be identified in the text. If you have a document that is from the other way around, in this case from English to Spanish, the glossary will still work. So once it finds the word agreement in the source text, it will suggest to you to translate it as acuerdo in Spanish. That's it about the glossaries. No, that's it. You can find all your resources, both translation memories and glossaries, in the workspace. You go to the menu. There is the resources tab. I mean the resources for all of your projects. You also have them for your specific projects. If you go to that project and choose the resources tab in the upper part, but you can also view them here. Let's take a look at glossaries. Here we have a lot of glossaries with the same name, but let's see the ones where we added some terms. Here's how it looks like. If you have your own glossary in Excel, for instance, a client gave it to you, or maybe you want to give. What I do a lot is when I have a new order from a client, I translate it. Instead of bugging them with questions about how to translate this or how to translate that, I make my own decision and I add every such decision to a glossary. Once I have finished the translation, I download the glossary and I give it to the client together with my translation. So I say like, okay, here's my translation and here you can find how I translated these or those terms. Let's open it with Google Sheets. You can, of course, open it with Excel as well. Unable to convert documents. Very funny, thank you. So let me then open it with proper Excel. I will have to switch my screen share in this case. It will take some time. Just a second. I will turn off this screen share. Sorry. Screen share, and I will share Excel screen. Do you see anything? Yeah, now you do. So that's how a downloaded glossary looks like. If you have your own document, you must create an empty glossary. It must have this structure that you have here. These fields are not required, so you will enter your terms that you use here. I don't know what to enter here, but anyway, after this is done, you can upload it once again to Smartcat and use it with your projects. Now let me switch back to the original screen share and get to your questions. Just 1 second. So I see that a lot of guys are asking questions in the chat, and I see that Alexandra is there helping out and answering. Thanks a lot, Alexandra. If you want me to answer them, you can post them to the Q&A section on the left, because I might not be able to catch up with all of them. Let me see if we have any questions about glossaries here. Okay, that's one. Wilson asks, even though I've set the glossary terms, the program is continuing to give incorrect translations, ignoring my glossary. That's a common misconception, that glossaries will be automatically inserted in your glossary terms will be automatically inserted in your text. They won't be. Especially because if you use machine translation, you usually use neural translation, and in neural translation you do not know which word corresponds, which word in the target segment corresponds to which word in the source segment. So the best you can do is have this machine translation of TM match and then insert the glossary manually. There is no option of having it inserted automatically. It just doesn't work this way. It is more like a convenient reference dictionary for you to use as you translate. XDM asks, do I find concordance in resources? I don't really know what this function is for. Concordance, as I said, is for searching matches within your previous translation. You do not find it in resources, you just do it as you translate by, as I showed here, by clicking here and searching for some term. You can also search by all your translation memories by going to resources, search, and in this case, it works across all your TMs. For instance, if you type in the word sign, it will look for it across all your glossaries, and also it was not found in glossaries. It will also look in all your TMs in the phrases section. No, in the examples section, sorry. You will see here these matches from your previous translation. It looks across all existing TMs. That's sort of concordant search across all TMs. Hopefully this answers the question. Okay, the next questions are about quality assurance, and I think that I will get to this right now. So quality assurance is something that helps you assure quality of your translations. If you take a look at my translation, you see that there are some segments marked with exclamation marks. It means that Smartcat has identified some problem with it. But I receive a lot of questions of people asking how to ignore this or that error and so on. My advice, my piece of advice is just to ignore them at all once you are translating. There are some errors that you cannot ignore. For instance, if you skip a tag, you will not be able to confirm a document. You will have not a yellow sign here, but a red sign, and you will also get a pop-up window saying that you must correct a critical error. It will be shown to you in red font, so you see that you have to close the tag. In all other cases, at least what I do when I translate, I don't pay any attention to these exclamation mark signs at all. In this case, for instance, you have source and target are identical, whatever, because they should be. In this case, you have skipped space after quotation mark and skipped space after period. Also, in this case, it's a part of a code. That's why we do not need to have them here. We will have a lot of segments where you have it like this. And in this case, why I say to ignore them, it doesn't mean I'm saying that this function is not useful. Let me do an error here. See, I inserted an incorrect email here, and Smartcat even will identify these kinds of errors. It will say that the email address in the target does not match the source. So unlike MS Word and simple quality spell checkers, it looks for a lot of kinds of errors. For instance, if I add an extra space in the end of the segment, it will also tell me that it's an error. But I still will not pay attention as I translate, because what you can do is translate the whole document, then go to your project, and click QA check. And you will get all your errors at once. Why I prefer this method is because when I translate, I focus on translation, not on fixing errors. Once the translation is done, comes the quality assurance stage. As they do on plants, on factories, you do not check everything the moment you produce it, because you have to distract yourself, you have to multitask, it takes your time, and it's much quicker if you do a task at once. If you translate at once, then you check quality at once. Then you spend less time switching between the tasks, and as a result, you get better speed. As you can see here, we have all the errors that it identified by categories. You can see what exact error. For instance, you have misspelled word. That's what a usual spell checker does. If you were doing this in MS Word, you will have to click through all of the spelling errors identified and say that it is not an error, it is an error, and so on. In this case, you have all this, and you can quickly check whether something is a real error. For instance, let's make a real error here and do the quality check once again. As you look through it, you see, oh, okay, this is indeed an error. I will go to this segment. It will open your document and at this very segment, and you will be able to fix it. Sometimes it's easier to just see the segment number and go to it using Ctrl-G and entering the segment number here. If you already have the document open, it might be easier to do it this way. But if not, you can just follow this link and do it like this. I will not wait for it right now because we're running out of time. But anyway, that's how I suggest doing this. And you have these errors like source and target are identical, or that email addresses do not match. See? You can also download the report in Excel format. In this case, for instance, you have translated the whole document and then you want to give your eyes a rest, or maybe you're traveling by train or plane. You just print it out or download it to your tablet and you just look through the errors, you make some notes, and then once you come back to an internet connected PC, you go back and you correct all the errors. That's the best way I find it, how it works. Okay, let's now look through the questions. Aiden asks, is there any way to remove the option of error recognition for a particular project instead of manually ignoring each supposed error? Yes, you can do this. If you already said that I don't advise ignoring each error, just pay no attention to it, but you can go to project settings, click setup quality assurance, and you can choose which errors you want to check for. For instance, you can say that you do not want to check for misspelled words at all. Or maybe you want to say that you want some error to be critical, and in this case, you will not be able to confirm a segment with it. For instance, we can make this error with not matching email addresses critical, because it's important, right? You're translating a document and suddenly you just had a slip of the finger and you entered the wrong email. In this case, when you try to confirm the segment, it will not allow you to. It will say that the email address doesn't match the source. Is there a way to ignore numbers in the whole document? What do you mean exactly by ignore numbers? What you can do is actually do pre-translation. I haven't talked about it yet. Unfortunately, we don't have time for this, but I will just quickly show you a walkthrough. Maybe you will be able to experiment afterwards by yourself. So we have this feature that is called pre-translation. If you go to your project, it's in the upper menu. You can add rules. For numbers, you can say that I want the numbers to be inserted automatically and the respective segments to be confirmed. You click Save and Run, and as a result, all segments that consisted of numbers only. I think there were some segments like this in my text. Let me try and find it. Like this. You see, these segments were automatically inserted and you will not have to bother about them at all. That extreme case, just to show it, let's say we want to insert machine translation to all segments, but it's an easy text. We want to do it by editing machine translation, which is technically called PEMT, post-editing machine translation, and we will have a separate webinar on this. And I do not suggest doing it for all kinds of documents, but let's just show. You see, I did not tick the confirm segment checkbox here. Let's come back to our document. Voila, you have all the machine translation suggestions inserted in all segments. So now you would be just translating by going through your segments and correcting them as necessary. Luisa asks, supposing I'm given a document that has many images inserted, will this type of document cause any problems when using Smartcat? Will it be more difficult to use Smartcat or even impossible? Thanks. No, not at all. It will not be harder to use Smartcat. Moreover, it will be much easier to do it on Smartcat because you will not have to bother with all these images inserted throughout the text. You will just have them shown as tags. I had some segments like this here. Let me search by click. You see, for instance, in this segment, it says you might click this or that in the top menu. In the original text, I don't have time to show it yet. These were some kind of images inserted in the text, button images. So they will be just converted to single text and you will use them like this. Carl asks, is it possible to use Smartcat without any empty engines, only using your own linguistic resources, which you upload and include in the project? Of course, feel free not to use any machine translation. When you create a project, as I have shown, you have a checkbox that says machine translation. And as I said, when I translate, for instance, some book on history or some literature, when I do some literary translation for myself mostly, I never use machine translation. In this case, you will just have to leave this checkbox empty, and you will be translating it from scratch, however you wish. But you know, sometimes even when I'm translating some marketing documents, I still turn on this checkbox. I do not look at the machine translation, but sometimes you get some wording like, I don't know, click this button or something like this. It just doesn't make sense to spend your brain power to translate this from scratch. So if you have a sentence that you know can be improved in your language to make it flow naturally, then you can translate from scratch. If it's a very simple sentence that you do not want to mess with and that you can save time with, then why not? That's my personal opinion. That's it. I do not have any questions here, but I think there were a lot of questions in the chat. There was one about, can we use external terminology resources? Not yet, not web search. Although I think there is a button for a web search when we work on a project. There is some bug using dictionaries from Spanish to English. Let's try doing this here. Yeah, it doesn't work. It should. There is some bug involved. You can write to support. It works if it's configured probably in account settings. And then it uses lingual dictionaries, but Lingui, no, you have to open it in a separate tab and do it like this, at least for now. Yeah, Alexander, thanks for sharing the link to the help. And also, there was a question from Katarzyna, is there something like manual for Smartcat? You can Google for Smartcat help. It most probably will give you a link to our help page, which is currently being updated and replaced, but at the moment it is as it is. Let me hide my screen share right now. You can also go to community.smartcat.ai and ask your questions there, because we have a wide community of people who visit it and who will be able to help you. You can also write to support@smartcat.ai at any time. We have 24/7 support, even though it's free, we have 24/7 support. It might take a while before we answer you. I think the SLA is somewhere around 4 hours to reply. So if you have an urgent request, mark your email with urgent. In this case, we will process it faster. But if you have a question about using the tool, you can just as well use the community website. Also use it if you have any suggestions or ideas. We also talk a lot about translation in general there, so you can also just join and ask your questions about the translation profession and so on. If you are new to Smartcat, you might want to check out our Crowdcast channel. We had a lot of webinars that are not about Smartcat, but about translation business, about freelancing, and so on. There are some very interesting webinars there. Now, that's it. I'm sorry if I missed your question in the chat. Come back to the community website to ask more, and see you online. Thank you all for coming. It was nice talking to you all. And see you next week. We will have some other webinar. stay tuned by following our community website. Talk to you later, see you online, bye-bye, and ta-ta!